Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. This is episode 2 of my podcast, Watch This List. I am your host, Amy Henserling, and we are joined by a very special guest today, editor, filmmaker, and fellow cinephile Lowe McKee, who pronounces his name Lowe, but is spelled Lowe. Care to comment, Lowe?
Yeah, I don't understand why that's the case, but I was thinking about this because I feel like a lot of people who are going to listen to this podcast use Letterboxd, and everyone on there knows me as Lowe, I would assume. But it's Lowe. It's Lowe. When I was in college, I had a professor tell me that my name was wrong, and that really upset me. Yeah, supposedly it's Scottish.
It sounds European to me, for sure.
I've never heard, yeah. I tell people it's like, you know, the name Lowry. Like David Lowery on our list today, Lowery. So that's what I tell people.
Yeah. Lowe McKee, I think, sounds better than Lowe McKee.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I'm privileged to have Lowe here as he is a video editor and has been helping tremendously with my podcast's inception and journey. So thank you for that, Lowe, too.
No problem.
And our name for this episode is Time Is Not on Your Side. Could you tell us a little bit about where that comes from and what your thinking was? Because you actually came up with this title.
Amy asked me onto this podcast, and she asked me for a category, any category I chose of movies that I'm passionate about or like movies that I love, and try and group them together. And I wasn't sure what to do at first. And I was thinking about the movies that I love. And I've kind of realized I've been thinking a lot about death recently. Not because like I haven't lost anyone in the last couple of years, but I think part of it is COVID. I think going through COVID, the instability of the last few years, how scary it was when it first happened. And then also like the books I've been reading and the movies I've been watching have all sort of forced the viewer to like think about death, think about the inevitability of it. And then also I'm terrified of dying. So maybe part of me as I'm getting a little bit older, I don't know, wants to face the fear. And so, yeah, so I came to Amy and I said, I want to do death movies. And that's where we started.
And you actually said, what was the phrase? Memento mori. I think that was the phrase you used, which is
it's like
remember you will die.
Yes. So it's a device in art that like historically has been in a lot of plays and a lot of art, like a lot of paintings and a lot of movies. And it's Latin for like, remember you will die. It's meant to make the audience reckon with, what's coming, basically. Like the famous speech, like Alas, poor Yorick from Hamlet, where he's holding the skull. That is like the textbook exam. If you like Google Memento Mori, that's if you're like writing an essay on it, that you're going to mention that. And so that's what I decided. I thought it'd be fun. To talk about death.
Just a good time chatting about movies and mortality.
Yep. I'm that bummer at parties who brings everybody. I'm the Debbie Downer who brings everybody down. But I try to choose a couple of movies that I thought were like pretty fun. So.
Well, and we did. I think it was another one was Impermanence. Was it Impermanence or?
Yeah,
that's the word you used. And then I thought of actually a line from Hamlet. The readiness is all. So
that's good too. That could be the title. That's a good.
We might just have to rearrange this bit.
You can,
and then have the readiness is all. But that and then or I'm ready was another one, and a line from what Lowe ended up choosing as his favorite film that's spoken in the movie was "Think About the Future." And I thought, that's also kind of encapsulates several of these movies very well.
I'm going to have to ask you when we get there because I don't remember that line.
Lowe is tuning into this show so that he will watch his own list as well as recommend that you all do the same.
Yeah, I lied. I haven't watched a single movie. I've never actually seen them. I just read the
Yeah.
Wikipedia articles.
He's just
Yeah.
making me watch them, which is really nice.
Yeah. I was
So,
forcing other people to watch movies about
yeah.
death. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So, time is not on your side. It's what we're going to go with. So keep that at the forefront of your memory as you're listening to these picks. So without further ado, we're going to start with Lau's number 5, which is the 1992 Robert Zemeckis screwball comedy Death Becomes Her. Why did you choose this?
I chose it because if I'm going to force, or if people are sitting down to listen to this podcast and they're starting out, they're like, "Oh, I know Amy and Lau from Letterboxd. I'm going to listen to this podcast." And the first thing I say is like, I'm going to force everyone to like think about their own inevitable demise. I'm going to start with a fucking banger. I'm going to start with a fun movie. Some of the movies on this list that we get to are spinach, but not like they're like delicious, like cooked in olive oil with salt and pepper and a little bit of garlic. Delicious spinach. So, but you know, it's nice to have some popcorn, you know. So I thought I would start with popcorn. It's directed by Robert Zemeckis, who is like a Spielberg protege. And he's really into like the technical side of filmmaking. He likes the special effects. He likes that sort of thing. So he makes this zany, like slapstick screwball comedy that has like noirish elements in the early 90s. And it stars Meryl Streep, Goldie Hawn, and Bruce Willis. It's about aging. It's about these women who are, and men who are, obsessed with youth and beauty, like we all are in the Western world. And somewhere along the way, one or a few characters gets offered the elixir of everlasting life. Things get pretty wacky when immortality gets involved.
Right.
Yeah.
So the out of the 5 that Lau chose, I would say this is the one that is the most tonally different. Although
Yes.
I could see how the ill preparedness or the unacceptance of just the natural order of things and like allowing the process of aging or just mortality itself to kind of happen as it's going to happen is the theme, which is also in some of the other ones where there's this hesitation to just accept and allow things to go their natural way.
100%. I mean, you never watched this when you were a kid, right?
No.
Because it used to be one of those movies that played on like TNT or TBS or USA, like on repeat. And so when I was younger, I loved Bruce Willis because my dad raised me on Die Hard. And every time I saw the movie on TV, I'd stop and watch it, but I'd catch like scenes or like the second half, or like I never watched the whole thing fully until like last year. You know, it doesn't explore, it has themes and ideas. It doesn't necessarily try to explore any of those themes or ideas as sort of in a nuanced way as some of the other movies on this list, but it does like ask a couple questions that me being like a 12-year-old was like, whoa, I've never thought of this before. Specifically, like the movie is like, here, we're offering you immortality. You don't have to worry about death. You drink this and
Right.
You're going to stay young and beautiful forever. When things start getting dark in this movie, my 12-year-old self who like never really thought about death, or my 11-year-old self, or whenever I watched it, it was sort of like a little bit eye-opening, I think. Because like it may not explore it as nuanced as like an Ozu film, but it's still there. And so I kind of like, I look back fondly on this movie because it is silly and it is funny. And like Robert Zemeckis is super excited about showing a giant hole in Goldie Hawn's stomach, which is on the poster of the movie, you know, or like Meryl Streep's like neck falling off and her head like being twisted all around. And to me, that's sort of what he did the movie for, I think, because that's the type of filmmaker he is. He always wants to do like the new boundary pushing CGI. Like it does touch on a couple things that can like open the door to like other ways of thinking a little bit, or like forcing you to be like, huh, yeah, would I want to live forever? Because that would, get lonely and boring.
Boring.
And like, yeah,
Mm-hmm. It also has some homages to like Frankenstein and like older movies that like monster creature feature type of stuff as well, where you can tell that he's a student of film. It's not just screwball comedy or satire. It's also like implementing things from old school techniques, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that. I did think about the fact that like the movie is pulling from like classic noir in a lot of ways. Specifically like Goldie Hawn's character and what she's trying to do in the movie. She feels a bit like a femme fatale.
And the dialogue is slightly stilted as well, where it's like feels a little bit hokey as well as very, very serious.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit noir. It's kind of a balance between over the top and very frank. So it definitely shares some tones there with things from the past that he's bringing into the 90s, early 90s.
Early 90s, yeah.
And it's it like, did make a lot of money too.
It was a big hit. It had like 3 massive stars in it. They're all like, honestly, they're the reason to watch the movie. The 3 of them, and Isabella Rossellini. She is really pretty.
I was about to say if we don't mention her, I mean,
yeah. She's look at that movie. That movie is only rated PG-13, and she's naked the whole movie.
Yeah, spoiler alert. But yes, if that doesn't sell this, I don't know what will. But there you have it, folks. Check this out. It's for rent on Amazon. You'll make young Lowe proud.
Yeah.
11-year-old Lowe.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, and then number 4 is a more recent one.
Yes.
This came out in 2021, directed by David Lowery, The Green Knight. For this one, I want to know what philosophically sort of drew this one to you, because I think this one stands out in your list as quite possibly the most introspective.
Sure. So The Green Knight is a movie based on a famous like Arthurian legend, but no one knows who wrote it. And it was just, I think it's been passed along generations through storytelling. And it's about, how are we saying his name? Gawain or Gowan?
I was about to say no one knows who wrote it and no one knows how to pronounce his name.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Gowan, because that's how I saw Gowan. Like David Lowery, the director, say it.
Go with that.
It's about Gowan, who's one of King Arthur's knights. He's the youngest. He's I believe he's King Arthur's nephew in the original tale. He is in the movie, and he is the knight who hasn't achieved legendary status. He's the young kid who's looking to get in there with the big dogs. Like he wants to be chivalrous. He wants to be a hero. He wants to be loved, and he hasn't gotten there yet. During Christmas dinner, when they're all sitting around the round table, this knight busts through the door, and he's this like magical creature almost. And he's the Green Knight, and he offers a game to anyone who wants to play with him. And the game is, if any knight will fight him, any blow that lands on the Green Knight, he gets to return in 1 year's time. And Gowan is like, this is my chance for to become a legend, to become a hero. And so he fights the Green Knight, and he chops off the Green Knight's head. Then the Green Knight, who's magic, stands up and says, see you in a year, buddy, and then rides his horse away. And that's the beginning of the movie, and that's the beginning of the legend.
It's just full of illusions, like with an A, and just rich storytelling to it. Yeah. But I know that you said that you got something from that would particularly...
I think it's in the story originally anyway, which is just like, this character, Gowan, he cuts off the head of this knight, and then the knight stands up and says, I get to do the same thing to you in a year. So immediately, like that character is forced into reckoning with his own death coming very much sooner than he had expected, and going on a journey to see if he can fight the night, defend himself. Like, he doesn't want to be a coward. Like, he can't just run away from it. He kind of wants to run away from it. And I think those were the ideas that the filmmaker David Lowery was interested in exploring. The movie's about a lot of things. It's about chivalry. What does that mean in the modern age? It's like a modern look at these like chivalry and heroism, and what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a good man versus a great man? All of these different things. But the thing that I think I responded strongest to was the way that the movie is commenting on the impermanence of life, the impermanence of all things through nature. Like, nature is the ultimate sign that we can look to, that things are always growing and things are always dying and always decaying. And everything is always changing, and life exists in cycles. In The Green Knight, in the film, if you've seen the trailer, he has like twigs and branches on himself, and he's like a tree. He's growing, and everything he touches starts growing moss and grass. And at one point, a character asks, like, why is the Green Knight green? And a lot of it, like, another reason I love the movie is because the movie definitely doesn't hold your hand. Like, this is a movie where what I took from it might not be what the next 100 people who see it take from it. And that also is what frustrates a lot of people, I think, that it doesn't explain
different
anything.
Interpretations, right?
Yeah. But what I think especially this last time I watched it, I went into the movie thinking about death and thinking about how we face it or how we choose not to face it.
I think that also what makes Green Knight interesting in comparison too is that he knows he's going to die. Whereas in Death Becomes Her, they're trying to get to a point where they are not going to die. And then if they do, they would know they're not going to die. So those are very interesting approaches where it's like, how would you act differently if you knew you were never going to die? How would you act differently if you knew when you were going to die?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I think those are interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I watched this interview, like, sort of like, gathering up all of my thoughts and trying to be as articulate as possible about these 5 movies. I was like reading about the movies and watching interviews, and I watched this interview with David Lowery where he talked about The Green Knight, and he talked about one of the reasons he wanted to make it was that, like, he recognizes, sometimes he thinks about the fact that, like, not only is he going to die, but his movie will eventually no longer ever be seen. Like, even though, like, your works of art can live past you, eventually you get to the point where even statues will crumble, poems will disappear. And like, thinking about it on that sort of macro scale, he's like, it makes him less concerned with like wanting power or wanting like respect or love, or and it just makes him want to like be good to the people while he's here, because eventually everything goes anyway. So right. Like, if I'm so focused on winning that Best Director Oscar, maybe in 15, 20, 30 years, I'll look back and think like, I wasn't a good father to my kids. I wasn't a good husband to my wife, like all of these things. And so I think that fits with the message of the film in a way, and of the few of the movies on this list, because I think we talked about the word impermanence earlier, and I've been really interested in Buddhism, and I want to talk about this a little bit more when we talk about my second movie on this list. But I've been learning a little bit more about Buddhism, just because I've been trying to like reconcile my thoughts on death and on change and on time. And I read like the things I learn about Buddhism sort of like resonate with me in a way, because I think the Western world is often like sort of ignoring or denying the inevitability of the constant nature, or like of change and of death. And Buddhism sort of teaches, in order to like that, to get to a place where you're like enlightened, that number one, life is suffering. That's like, when you exist, you are going to suffer. Number two, suffering is caused by attachment and desire, like specifically like desire to hold on to things that we can't hold on to, wanting power, wanting wealth. If you fall in love with someone, holding on to them so tightly because you don't want things to change. And we can't hold on to those things. Everything changes all the time. I think Gowan in this film wants to be a legend. He wants to be a hero. He wants to be a great man, a great knight. He doesn't necessarily want to do the work to get to those things in the beginning of the movie. But I think, like, we can't talk about this scene. The ending of the movie is so great. The ending of the movie is so great because I honestly watched it and I was like, whoa, this feels so similar to the stuff I've been reading in like books about like Buddhist thought, because it's all about letting go. And if you let go, maybe you can like alleviate your suffering a little bit more.
Oddly enough, if you let go, that's when you're ready to do anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
It's almost like that's the lesson there, is that that's a precursor to anything that you want to do, like the precursor to passion and creation is that you're not gripping it so tightly, and that you're okay with whatever happens to it. It's not like it has to be yours.
Yeah.
Like it's free to be whatever. You're just there to be a fuel for it. And if you can have that attitude about most things, I would think that people would be happier.
I think this movie, as well as a couple on this list, sort of act as like parallel journeys happening at the same time. Like, there's the literal journey that he is going on, and then sort of the more important thing is like the inner journey, because this movie is about how he is changing as he's faced with all these obstacles, as he's faced with, you might get your head cut off in a week, man.
Yeah. So, yeah. And you're bringing yourself to that place, to the Green Chapel.
Yeah.
So everyone should see this movie. I'm a firm cheerleader for the Green Knight. It's currently streaming on Showtime. You could also do what Lowe and I did and go to Amazon and get your free trial of Showtime so that you could watch it. But big thumbs up for Green Knight, and check it out.
I think this might be the only one that, or I don't know, I'll find out when we talk about these others, but I think it might be the only one that you and I both love.
We shall see.
Okay,
so now we are arriving at Lowe's number 3 pick, which is also a newer one from last year. The Worst Person in the World, directed by, I don't know how you say Trier's first name, actually.
I think it's Joachim.
Okay.
Joachim, or I think it's Joachim Trier.
Okay, let's keep it that way then. So, Worst Person in the World. Tell us, because you and I are kind of in the age range for this movie, I feel.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell us what you personally related to as far as being in the demographic that this is depicting and targeting.
I watched this pretty recently when it came out. It came out in theaters in the States in the spring, and I watched it and I dug it a lot. And I responded to it because it is a movie I could recognize aspects of my own life in and a lot of young people in. It's a movie about this young woman named Julie who is in her 20s. And like a lot of us, she's trying to figure out her life. She's in that place where the world is her oyster in a way, and she could do whatever she wanted, but she doesn't know what she wants. She's kind of constantly changing herself to figure out what she wants to do, who she is, who she wants to be, all of these things. And it's messy. I think I, in my 20s, could be someone who could be kind of hurtful because I was thinking about myself before others, or not even recognizing that I was doing that, just trying to do what I was going to do. I think of the 5 movies on this list, this one is the least, at least maybe to the outside observer, it seems like it is the least death related. In my sort of journey of trying to think about death and explore death, I'm looking at movies that are both literally doing it, where it's in the title, like Death Becomes Her. In many different ways, these movies tackle these themes. But then also ways in which death is figurative, and death is just another example of change. And for example, if you go to a tarot card reading and you pull the death card, I think a lot of people would feel unsettled by pulling the death card, but it's not actually most of the time supposed to be taken literally. The death card is a card of transformation. It's a card of the end of one, phase and the start of another. And this movie is all about ending phases. It's about placing your identity on the relationship you're in and then realizing that's not for you and then moving on to another one. It's about the career you're trying to go down. It's about, should I be a mother or not, And so I felt moved by it. It's interesting. I want to get into this conversation with you because I know that you weren't as much moved by it, even though I think maybe you appreciated the filmmaking, because I do think like Joachim Trier is an incredibly talented filmmaker. To anyone who hasn't seen this film, this is like one of those movies I would like offer up to anyone who like doesn't watch foreign films. I would be like, no, this movie is really entertaining and it moves really quick. And the filmmaking is, stylized and fun. And it takes you in like directions you don't expect. It's like one of the more mainstream movies on this list, I would say. Like easiest to digest, even though a lot of people don't like. Bong Joon-ho said like he wants people to get over climb the mountain of like, or climb over the wall of the 2-inch subtitles at the bottom of your screen. This would be a movie I would recommend to people for that. But I know you have some thoughts about it.
Well, I was going to say that I think it doesn't necessarily go in line if the theme is just death solely, doesn't go, but if it is time,
sure,
then I think that the way that Julie is completely unaware of time is how it's going. So if you have eternal time in 5, and then you have knowing when the ending is, like your own expiration date is in Green Knight. This one's like, she is not thinking about the future at all. Like she is in the moment to the max. Like there's not a tremendous level of foresight. So it's just going from one thing to the other, doing the best that she can, or responding to what she thinks that she wants in that moment, instead of it being what could happen, what might happen, or that she's getting older. She doesn't seem to have that awareness.
Funny, I would almost like, I didn't think about it that way, because despite, I would agree, like her very impulsive nature in the film, like she's not like, I say I can relate to this movie, but like a lot of the things she does in this movie, I'm like, whoa, I would never do that. Like, but she's very impulsive, but at the same time, I think she is constantly thinking about the future, because more than anything, she wants to lead a full and interesting life. So she's like, that's why she keeps jumping from thing to thing to thing, because she tries something out and it's not hitting that spot for her. So she's like, what can I do? Should I be a photographer? Should I try to be a mother? Will that do it? Like, this relationship's not doing it for me. This person seems cool. Like, maybe I should do that, And so I think in a way maybe she's not thinking about it. She's kind of thinking about these things vaguely.
I don't think it's that she's like, because somebody who's preoccupied with the future would be more careful, I would think, with their current actions, and be more organized or methodical if you're trying to get a certain result. she seems like she's acting out of a place of like, no, like I really want to be happy and I want to be like passionate, but it's not necessarily intentional. She's not responding to thinking about the future in a way that would affect it in the way she wants. So that's
Sure,
why I
yeah.
think there's a disconnect between, I know what you're saying, and I agree that she is preoccupied with something that she doesn't have, but I don't know that, I think she's more afraid, like afraid of missing out.
Yeah, there's multiple characters in the movie keep asking her like, what is she waiting for? And again, like these are things that I sort of related to about it, because like I get there, you could have asked me when I was 25, like, what are you doing, man? And I'd be like, I don't know, you know. And also there's another aspect of this movie that I really love, because like all of these ideas of like thinking about time, thinking about change, thinking about death. I think it's kind of all thinking about the same thing. There's an aspect of this movie that reminds me of my 20s, where when you're in your 20s, the world is out in front of you and you're constantly thinking about like, what is my 30s going to look like? And like, what job am I going to have? And am I going to be with somebody? And you feel like you have time. I think a lot of us do, and not everyone does. Julie in this movie is incredibly privileged. So she gets the ability to really like take her time in making decisions in a way a lot of people don't. I think most of us experience something somewhere along the way in our 20s where that feeling that we have time, suddenly we recognize that it's kind of an illusion. Like that I can make all the plans in the world, but I could walk out of my house right after this podcast and get hit by a bus. I think that ties this movie into The Green Knight a little bit. He opens up the movie saying, I have time. And I think and they're both, Julie and Gowan are both very young, and they're both sort of treading water in a way, and sort of selfish people. But there are things that happen in life, especially if you're in your 20s and like you lose someone who's too young to die. Like I've had friends die of cancer, and I've had friends commit suicide. And or die in an accident. Like when those things happen to you in your 20s, it shocks you. It put you like, I felt it like for days afterwards. You're like in a daze almost, because it's like shaking you out of this feeling that the future's ahead of you. Whereas like people in their 60s, when people die, they find out their old friend died. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it's sad, but like when we are in our 20s, we feel immortal a little bit.
And you just assume that you do. You assume that you're going to live till X amount. I mean, you don't really think about it.
Yeah, you don't want to think about it. You want to think like, oh, I hope I don't want to get sick. I plan on living into my 80s or 90s, you know? I don't even want to talk about it. Let's not talk about it. I think a lot of the main characters in the movies on this list are characters who are struggling because they're not facing that knowledge. Things could end anytime. And so you might as well be present in life. And like, instead of worrying about the future so much, you should have a conversation with another person and look them in the eye and listen to what they're saying. I think the worst person in the world, like her character, who she's a pretty selfish person, is kind of going through that struggle a little bit, even though it's not like directly stated in the film. And that's kind of what I responded to, though I know that it wasn't your bag as much. And I think that's fair, because I think like Amy and I have been talking about this movie over text a little bit, and it wasn't her favorite. And all of her critiques, I was like, I kind of get it. Like there's some movies, there are some movies where if you were like, I don't like this movie, I would be like a lawyer and I would defend it. And I don't feel the need to defend this one, because I do see like the things about it that are a bit annoying. That being said, anyone listening to this podcast, like this is one of the more accessible movies on my list, even though it's subtitled.
And I would say that it was extremely popular. It was universally acclaimed. I mean, almost across the board. It was on almost all of the best of lists last year. I mean, I saw it constantly being praised. So my opinion is rather minority comparatively, but I would still recommend, like Lau was saying, it is more accessible, surprisingly, especially if you're in this age bracket. And I think it's worth seeking out, because it does fall in line with the philosophical things that Lau is honing in on. And even if you have a negative response to it, it will make you think about it. So that's why I have to stand behind it, because ultimately it did make me grapple with certain things. They were kind of things that annoyed me, but then it made me question why they annoyed me, which is a good thing.
Yeah, sure.
It's a good exercise.
And also, yeah. Well, it's especially because you didn't like it. It like makes you formulate why. You know, there's some movies like you were on this podcast, The Unwatchables, and like that's like a whole different level. Like,
oh my gosh,
like I don't know if I could do that. But
yes, they watch movies where I'd be like, not only am I too afraid to watch this in the first place, but I wish I'd never seen it. That's how I felt when I was talking about Trouble Every Day. I was like, this movie is no value add. Shout out to Mark and Seth and Tony, but that is like, no, thank you. I wish I hadn't seen that. So this is not that for sure.
So you'll probably like it.
Yes. And we hope that you see it. It is for rent on, or it was for rent on Amazon. Lau told me today it's on Hulu
now.
Right. Yeah. So you can get it on Hulu now. But Worst Person in the World, good movie, in Lau's opinion. So check it. Okay, now we're getting into the nitty gritty here. So number 2 is the 1949 film by Ozu, Late Spring, which pissed me off. And
I read your review. Yeah.
I would say this is probably my favorite of his list, just because the reaction was so visceral. I say this in a way that's like loving, but it made me speak to the TV, like yelling at the TV. So it's very gripping, and I want to know, Lau, because this is about a woman who doesn't want to get married. I wondered how you personally, what spoke to you with this story particularly.
What really spoke to me with this film, I've only seen 4 Ozu movies, but every single one that I've seen, yeah, but there's like 30, and like I know like some people we follow on Letterboxd are like, I'm on my 26th one, and I feel like, you know, like not a cinephile compared to a lot of people. Of the 4 that I've seen, I just watch them and I think like, man, like Ozu really understands human behavior, and he really understands like what it means to like exist and struggle. This movie is about a father and daughter who, the daughter is grown. She's in her late 20s, and it's post-war Japan. It's 1949, so just a few years after the war ended. And she's unmarried, and they live together, and they're very happy. And she loves her father, and he loves her, and they're getting along. They got a good thing going. And unfortunately, the rules of society basically state that, you know, a young woman needs to get married. That's what she's supposed to do. And so there's a lot of pressure coming from society for her to get married. And the movie is exploring when change is forced upon you.
Yes.
And
it's very Jane Austen. Very, very Jane Austen.
Yes. Yeah. And what I responded to strongest, I think that Ozu makes movies about people's inner lives. I think they're all about how, like, and his movies are very much about regular life. They're about kind of day-to-day, not super dramatic or melodramatic storylines. They're often very, very simple. I think every single person on earth has a story that's worth a good movie. If you're just like a regular accountant guy, someone out there can make a good movie about your life. And I think Ozu is that type of person. And in this film, it's about this father and daughter who are sort of forced to change their life in a way that they don't necessarily want to. But like, and it's just about like a person who's kind of forced to get married. But what it's really about is the deep kind of well of emotions that exist under every interaction that we ever do. Like people do not like confrontation. Most people do not say how they actually feel, you know, especially in public, especially in social settings. But like beneath everything that we do, there's nuance and layers. So there are moments in this movie where maybe a character is saying something while they're smiling, because this movie has a whole lot of smiling. Did you notice all the smiling?
Yeah, especially from her.
Yeah, and her smile is so bright and bubbly, but there's so much happening underneath of that smile. Later in the film, the father is always smiling, even though they're like him and his daughter are like sort of forced to undergo this change that neither of them want. I watch that and I think, oh, Ozu gets it. He understands like the way people move through this world. I recognize the ways in which I like hold things in rather than be honest or confront situations that I should, but I don't, out of fear or out of not wanting to piss people off or out of wanting to conform. So like, I can't relate specifically to a young woman in the 40s who doesn't want to get married, but I can relate to the ways in which, I don't know how to put this. Like, there's a line in this movie where she just says one word and she says the word yes to a question that's asked of her. And on the surface, it's just nothing. But underneath, it's everything. It's everything. Like behind her smile, behind everything, there's like an ocean, a deep ocean of emotion.
And this one has the kind of unique attribute to it in terms of time not being on our side, like because it's a cultural sort of traditional sense. Like time is not on her side because the older that she gets, the more society is going to disapprove of her not being married. So it's not like she's faced with death itself, but it is a kind of death.
Yes, absolutely.
So in that sense, it's like, you know, this one has the interesting edge to it where it's like, yeah, she's getting older, you know, it's like, hurry up and get married. Almost every single character who speaks to her in this movie tells her that she should get married. So it's coming at her constantly from every single person. So this was the most to me where it was like yelling, you know, your time's up, your time's up, your time's up. Like, why aren't you?
Someone says in the movie says, someone in the movie says, I think it's her, says marriage is a graveyard. And I like paused the movie and I wrote it down.
Oh, for sure. And for it's Kimiko, I believe. I don't want to say her name wrong, but she does think of it that way. And the reason that the movie just made me incensed is because the traditional, the way that it's set up, it doesn't allow for that freedom of choice. And it's done in very polite, you know, seemingly harmless ways, which is even worse than just someone forcing you into something and blatantly doing so. It's so much worse when it's done in like suggestion and courteous conversation.
She's always asked like, are you sure you want to do this? Or no one's forcing you, right? And she says yes, but at the same time,
of course,
it powers out, you know, everything's forcing her, you know, it's all out of her control in a way.
Which is a lot truer to life, I think, than perhaps something like The Green Knight, where, you know, we don't necessarily get an epic journey where we meet all of these mystical characters and have animals speaking to us and leading us to something that's so otherworldly. We're a lot more like Julie and Kimiko, where a lot of times it's the things that we're around that will determine our fate. And then the way we respond to them ultimately does. But this one in particular is very engaging.
It is tension filled because as we sort of like see what's starting to happen and the kind of the invisible forces that are making it happen, like societal forces, you don't want her to get married. You're like, please don't, whatever. Can someone step in? Like, I think a lot of people would maybe say like Ozu is boring. I'd be like, it's not boring.
Definitely not this one. Now, he has had some where
A couple.
I could have fallen asleep. Yeah, if you're going to start with an Ozu, I would I've only seen 4, but I would recommend going with this one over any of the ones I've seen, because this seems like an easier transition to his style.
This is another movie that feels like it made me think of reading about impermanence in a book about Buddhism. It made me think about everyone who's trying to hold on to things rather than letting go and recognizing that things are always changing and then moving accordingly. That's sort of what the movie is commenting on a little bit.
And Late Spring, I believe, Late Spring is streaming on Criterion, and it might also be on HBO Max, because that could have been where I watched it as well. I will double check that.
A lot of old movies, yeah.
But a lot of Ozu's movies are also on the Criterion channel, so definitely check that one out. Now we have arrived at Lau's number 1 pick, which is the only one that I had rated pretty low. I had originally given this 2 stars and just said it wasn't my thing. I rewatched it yesterday, and it is definitely 4 stars or above.
Really? I love that.
So I have come around to this.
Oh, awesome.
And I will say why, but I want Lau to talk about it first. But this is Varda's famous French New Wave film, Cleo from 5 to 7, from 1962.
Yes.
And it is perhaps, I think, the most similar to Gawain's, or however you put it, Gawain's Journey in the Green Knight. I was thinking the exact same thing. Yes, I think those two are by far the most similar. And Lau, I'm interested in how you would compare the first half of this movie to the second, because I think that's what struck me the most. The difference between how we're introduced to Cleo and then how we finish with her. Okay. Without spoiling, which is hard, but just general sense. Yeah, I kind of want to spoil, but I know. I hear you. This was the first Agnes Varda movie that I watched, and I fell in love with it. Her movies are like, when I watch a Agnes Varda film, I feel better about humanity. I just think this is like the best of what people can be, and I want to see the world through her eyes. It's a narrative feature about a famous Parisian singer, this young celebrity named Cleo, who we get to spend a day with her, or more specifically, we get to spend an hour and a half with her as she awaits medical test results, which could be cancer and could be terminal cancer. So she is being faced very clearly with her own mortality. And we spend this day with her as she kind of deals with her existence ending, possibly, and sort of panicking in some moments and being calm in others. And we travel with her around Paris. And kind of part of the movie is almost like a documentary of Paris, because Agnes Varda is a wonderful documentarian. And all of her movies sort of blend documentary and narrative in a way that I think is really, really fun. I guess I would say, like, of course, like, I've never had to go through what she goes through in this movie, but it felt really truthful to me, even though it hasn't happened to me. And that I think it makes sense that that hour and a half we spend with her feels like really heightened and really like a concentrated dose of life. When someone goes through a near-death experience, it kind of shakes them out of routine, and all of a sudden they kind of look out at the world as if it's new again, the way you did when you were a kid. And I feel like we see the movie through her eyes. Sometimes literally the camera is her eyes in this film. Mm-hmm. And it feels like she is experiencing everything around her in a new way. And it's because she knows she may not get to experience it much longer. The energy that the movie captures, I think, feels very, like, capital T truthful to me. And this one in particular, too, is I'm just thinking of how all these are different levels of, like, not ever dying, knowing when you're going to die. And then this one would be how, because she has very particular, hers would be illness. So if it is in fact that she's sick, it's also thinking about what if you knew how you were going to go? How would that change the way you see somebody talking to their significant other at a restaurant, or how you look at strangers just walking across the street, or because there's a lot of scenes where we're kind of overhearing, random conversations, right? And she's listening. And you get the impression from the beginning, the way that her character's set up is that she's a spoiled brat and she is very shallow, seemingly. So all of a sudden, when it's like, well, I'm going to find out today if I'm going to die, she starts paying attention to things.
Yeah.
And that we're heightened about her perspective, as well as her being heightened about life, like life happening around her.
Like, I don't think she would overhear those conversations a week before.
She would not have been listening. I don't think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I think one of the journeys of the movie is her going from disconnection to connection. She's so, at the beginning of the film, she's beautiful, she's young, she's very talented, and she believes everything people say about her. They've also sort of put her in a box at her own disadvantage. The way that she's sort of treated by especially the men in her life is very, like, no one takes her seriously in a way. I think at the beginning of the movie, she is a celebrity. She believes the idealized versions of herself. She's totally separate from the world around her. And the movie is a bit of a journey toward connecting with people again.
And herself.
And herself. 100%. Because you're right. She's standing up for herself, and there's sort of two halves of the movie. And the movie is her sort of like constantly throwing off layers of artifice until she becomes herself again. Like, they're not afraid to make her unlikable. And I like that. I like that they make her unlikable. And then it all works because she does sort of, through her own journey, reveal herself, right? Rediscover herself. And I love that the man she meets, the reason why they connect is because he is a soldier about to go to war the next day. So he almost is in the same boat as her. He has his own form of possible cancer. And it's like, going to battle and dying. They are both like on the precipice of not knowing if they're going to make it or not.
But I don't think that if she hadn't been sick or thought she was sick, that she would have even talked to him. So there's this whole element of like, it would be devastating to get news tomorrow that I am ill and like there's something that's going to happen that's unavoidable. But at the same time, that might foster relationships or introduce people that I would have never interacted with before. So maybe the takeaway too is like, in a weird way, live as if you are aware of that, because it would open you up. If you operated in that fashion, it would open you up for relationships that you might never otherwise engage in.
And it's such a hard thing to actually do. Like, people say it all the time, like, do things as if you don't have it tomorrow or whatever. And that's like, you can sort of say it out loud all you want, but it's really hard to force yourself into a place where you do things like that. And one of the things I've been reading a little bit about, this is a totally separate subject, but I've been reading a little bit about like psychedelic drugs recently. I read this wonderful book. Called How to Change Your Mind. And it's all about how, as we age as adults, we get locked into like neural patterns and repetitive ways of thinking. This is what happens when we get older, because the way that our brains process information is we experience something, then we log it, and then we experience a new thing, we reference that log. They describe it in the book as like when you're first born, your brain is like a hill covered in snow. And your thought patterns are like the little children who go up on that hill with sleds. And when you're first up on that hill, you can sled in any direction you want. But eventually, 3 or 4 lanes form and everyone uses those lanes. And that's the way we think all the time. And that can lead to depression, that can lead to anxiety, that can lead to feeling stuck in routine, all of these things. And like these psychedelic drugs, they shake the they shake the snow globe, and it can like shake you out of routine. It can shake you out of unhealthy thought patterns and thought habits that you have. And it's not really tied into this, but sort of tied into this, because I think like we're talking about death, we're talking about aging, we're talking about time, and and you can also achieve all these things through Buddhist meditation. It just takes like 20 years to do it. But the super highway is like popping a mushroom cap in your mouth and
I was gonna say, you're also reminding me of a movie I watched recently called Fearless by Peter Weir, directed by Peter Weir with Jeff Bridges, where he gets into a plane crash and he survives it, and that changes everything, the way he lives, the way he sees everything around him, architecture, nature, the way he, even the way he breathes. So it is challenging to kind of will yourself logically or rationally into adopting a new perspective when nothing external or chemical has happened. Like you were saying, you could talk about it all day, but then not do anything. And so sometimes it does actually take something happening to you or in you. But if we can be mindful and have, Cleo's experience kind of be an inspiration to think in those terms that are at first glance morbid, but actually are good for her. And then I think that's a benefit that the movie shows very well. And that's what ultimately brought me around, was the ending.
Yeah. I love the ending. I love the last scene.
I think Varda did an exceptional job at hitting the notes perfectly. Oh, I was going to tell you, the think about the future line was when she meets Antoine in the park and he's talking about his mother. He's saying something about like his mother was telling him a story or something, and she said, think about the future. And I was like, oh, that could be the name of this podcast. But, But
okay,
continue.
yeah, I do remember that now, because I was like, who is it? Was it Antoine? I can't.
Yeah,
but I was just going to say, this movie is sort of perfect as my number one on this list, because not only is it my favorite movie on the list, but it's also, it represents everything I'm looking for out of the experience of watching movies that make me think about my death. Because in thinking about your death, it affects the way you live your life in a positive way. That's the hope. And then this movie fits so well with Green Knight. They're both journey films.
And if you want to be a true cinephile and have your cinephile card, Cleo from 5 to 7 is necessary viewing. I would think by anyone's 100%. Standards. So a snobby cinephile would tell you that you gotta at least see that one and check that one off the list in order to get into the club.
I'm so glad you liked it more. That's cool.
Oh yeah, I did, and I thought I felt so embarrassed that I initially was just like, I don't know what mood I was in or what I was thinking about, but it just didn't hit me nearly as much. And credit to you, because it could have been that the sequence of watching Lau's movies, one after the other with these similar themes, could have also kind of informed that viewing.
Yeah.
So
I thought about that when I was watching it, because I was like, oh, I see a little bit of Julie and Cleo. I see a lot of Gowan or Gawain and Cleo.
So this could also serve as, not only do we want you to watch this list, but this is also kind of a handy way of saying, if you like this, then you'll like this. Because if you like The Green Knight, you'll definitely like Cleo from 5 to 7, I think, even though they're very different visually, thematically, they resonate.
They touch on similar things, I think. Yeah.
Exactly.
100%.
So that one is also on HBO Max. And just to recap, Lau's 5, we have Death Becomes Her, The Green Knight, The Worst Person in the World, Late Spring, and Clear from 5 to 7. And we want you to watch all of them, but watch the one that stands out most to you. And I'm going to end with 5 movie questions, popcorn questions for Lau, as I was inspired by James Lipton's Inside the Actors Studio. I won't ask you your favorite curse words or what what turns you
Wanna
off
hear
and
the pearly
on.
gates?
Yeah, the pearly
Yeah.
gates. But
Yeah.
I've got my own set here.
Yeah.
So first, Lau, what do you think is the most underrated movie?
Okay. I'm going to say this is maybe a left field one, but I'm going to say Dumb and Dumber is an
Wow.
incredibly underrated movie, purely because Jim Carrey gives one of the greatest performances captured on film ever. And
Wow.
like no one, very few people ever in the history of cinema can do what Jim Carrey is doing on screen in that movie. His ability with physical comedy is unmatched.
I don't think there could be, if you tried, a bigger leap from Cleo from 5 to 7 to Dumb and Dumber. So you get that award. That is the biggest jump I have. My brain literally stopped working. So
do you even have you seen it?
I wouldn't call it underrated just because I think it's so popular, but maybe
I think it's underrated, and I think it's underrated in that like Jim Carrey should have been nominated for an Oscar.
Lau, I almost feel like we should release this podcast under Dumb and Dumber. But yes, if you have not seen Dumb and Dumber, or if you have rated it low, Lau is displeased and thinks that you're dead wrong. Okay, number 2. What is your happiest movie experience?
I actually wrote a letterboxd review about this very subject, which is my happiest movie experience 100% is when I was 13 years old in December 2001, and I went to go on opening night. Me and my brother went to go see The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And it's my happiest experience because it comes out of a very rough time in my life. My dad had just died, and my brother and I needed The Lord of the Rings. Like, we needed that experience. That 3 hours we were in the theater, I was locked in. The world disappeared. I'll never have a better film watching experience in my life, I don't think. I'm almost positive.
You were transported.
Transported, 100%.
That's so neat. Yeah. That's awesome. All right, number 3, a movie you changed your opinion on.
Okay, so when I was thinking about this, it's really easy to pick a movie that you used to love that you don't like anymore. I think because, like, for example, when I was 15 years old, I watched like Garden State, and I was like, oh my God, this movie's beautiful. And now if I watch it, I'm like, this movie's insufferable. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of movies that I didn't like that I like now. And the one that I could think of was Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express, which I watched recently. And and I didn't like it at first because I thought it was just style over substance. It was just everybody's cool. Nobody's a real person. Faye Wong singing California Dreamin' is a literal manic pixie dream girl. Like, this movie's not for me. But I rewatched it, and I don't know why. It just hit me different. And I love the vibe of it.
That's awesome.
Have you seen that movie?
I have, and I did not like it. So I clearly need to rewatch it. Just like with Cleo.
Yeah. Well, how long ago did you watch it?
That's a good question. I want to say probably 2 years ago. I've struck out with him many times now because I did not like Fallen Angels, which is a controversial take. I know.
I hated that movie.
I can't stand it. And I'm so sorry to everyone who loves it. My sincere apologies. And then In the Mood for Love is okay, but definitely not the level that it gets to me. Yeah. So, but that one I know is beloved. So I probably need to rewatch sometime down the line when I'm in a better mood. Number 2, what am I on? 4, I'm sorry. An actor you find undeniably sexy.
For the last 5 or 6 years, I've had a massive, massive crush on Carrie Coon. Do you know Carrie Coon?
Yes, of course.
Have you ever watched The Leftovers?
Yes.
Speaking of shows about death and grief,
wow,
I love her. Wow. I think she is so talented, but also like a total babe. And like, I just think her Nora on The Leftovers is like the coolest. And then she's a great actor. She's in great movies.
Wow, that is Carrie Coon. You heard me say undeniably, right? Undeniably sexy. Okay.
Oh, dude, everything she does, everything she's in, I'm into it. I got to meet her once. like I worked on a movie as a PA and she was on set for one day, and I was like, I love The Leftovers, and she was so sweet to me, and like, oh man, I have a massive crush on her.
Wow, most people do not get to meet their crushes in real life, so you're very fortunate. I don't associate her with sexiness, but I think that's
she's pretty hot in The Leftovers. Did you watch The Leftovers?
Yes.
She like gets it on with Kevin a lot. He's hot. Hello. You know what I'm talking about? My other one would be Idris Elba. I think Idris Elba is like the pinnacle of man. But I'm gonna stick with Carrie Coon.
Okay, number one. If you were to die and come back as a movie character, who would you choose?
This is the first thing that popped in my head when I heard this question was like more questions. Like, does this mean that I go into the world of the movie, maybe you don't have an answer and that's fine, or am I bringing that character into my life and like in the real world, or like, cause like
this is what Frank asked for clarification for, and I was like, I'm not telling you, but I'll go ahead and tell you. It's like, let's say your answer was Ferris Bueller. It means that you would be Ferris Bueller in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
That heavily affects the choice. One of my nightmares is to like wake up and all of a sudden I'm in the universe of the show Friends. Like that would be my nightmare. Like that, like if everyone was being like quirky and sweet all the time, like I would want to like blow my brains out.
That's how I feel about Big Bang Theory, but
oh, totally. Yeah. If you woke up and like all of a sudden everyone was acting like they're on the Big Bang Theory all the time, like that would be a nightmare. Like, so that's like a weird fear of mine. I feel like you're going to get this answer from other people maybe, but like the dude from The Big Lebowski.
Oh, that's
like,
great.
Yeah. He's just, speaking of like Buddhism shit, he's just Zen, man. He just lets it all float off. Like I wish I was as tranquil as he was, but he just carries that air of not giving a care in the world.
Yeah, and he is high. So I mean, he's also just like not all there as well, which makes it easier not to be so focused on all the mayhem that's going on around him. But that's definitely a good choice.
Not all there, but also like pretty witty sometimes, like on the money. Like like when they pick up the bowling ball and they're like, "What is this?" And he's like, "Obviously, you're not a golfer." Like great. He's great.
New shit has come to light.
Yeah.
You weren't privy to the new shit.
This aggression will not stand, man.
This aggression will not stand, man. Walter, what are you talking about? Oh, it's also one of the most quotable movies of all time, too.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Well, I think these answers are terrific. I guess I need to revisit Dumb and Dumber and rethink my outlook on Carrie Coon. But it has been a pleasure having you, Lowe. Thank you for sharing with us your top 5 picks. And for the rest of you, see you at the movies.